Good morning, everyone. I couldn't wait to get here this morning. Thank you for getting up. Thank you for joining us. We've got a really lot of territory to cover this morning and so little time to cover it, and I have to tell you something. I was sitting on Monday night, I had dinner with friends of mine, and on Tuesday morning, I was sitting on the runway in Los Angeles getting ready to leave for here. And the husband of the couple that I had been with texted me, and he said, "Where are you?" And I texted back, and I said, "On my way to NOLA." Pause. He texted back, "Who's she?" And I thought, similarly, I don't really know Consolidated Graphics. I mean, I'd heard so many wonderful things about Consolidated Graphics, but I didn't really know the company. And today we're going to learn so many principles from companies, great brands all around the globe, about how to turn a great company into a powerhouse brand. And what I thought we'd do is we'd just take those principles at the end and apply every single one of them to Consolidated Graphics and see how Consolidated Graphics is doing. Because I'll tell you something, print is alive, and I have never seen it more than I've seen it these past couple days. All right, so you ready to get rolling? Let me tell you something. We're going to go on a tour of this, the human mind. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at why people make the buying decisions they make and how they go about making those decisions, how they decide about choosing us and our company and our products and our services. Now, in the 1990s, after that freeway ride with Meredith, and in the better part of the last decade, I had a front row seat to the creation of something absolutely magnificent and ultimately to the utter destruction of it. In the 90s, I was invited to Seattle, Washington to meet with a tiny little regional bank that nobody knew, including myself. And I signed up to a management team that was determined to grow the franchise, and we did, from $30 billion to over $300 billion in assets. And when I left in 2005, in a nationwide Harris poll, consumers named it one of the top 10 financial services brands in the United States of America. It was really a remarkable moment. And years later, I would look back, and the unimaginable happened. It became the largest bank failure in US history. About that time, I got a call from London, WPP, a big communications company, and they said, "Brad, listen, great brands all around the planet want you to come to a symposium in multiple cities on multiple continents talking about what fueled the rise of this great brand and what ultimately resulted in its destruction. And in a few minutes, you'll also see what emerged from the ashes." But what was so interesting to me is that it wasn't banks that were asking. In London, it was Marks & Spencer, the retail company, Ernst & Young, American Express. In Dublin, Ireland, it was a telecommunications company, Vodafone. They had a 50% share of market in Europe. Big energy company called Iberdrola in Spain. And a transportation company in Hong Kong called Cathay Pacific Airlines. And so we all came together from around the globe for the answer to a single question. What can we do to ensure that our brand is chosen first? That was the question. And here's where the journey began. Here's where my journey began. For those of you who know the Seattle area, Puget Sound is absolutely beautiful. On one side are the Cascade Mountains, and on the other side are the Olympic Mountains, and it's a place where the unexpected can happen. Well, that's what it looks like in the minds of the people who live there, including myself, but this is how it looks from the air. I mean, most of the time it's cloudy and overcast, and what happens is these incredible storms blow in off the Pacific coast, and they blow in waves of creativity. I mean, after all, the area is the home to Amazon and Microsoft and Starbucks and Costco, and this, a little bank named Washington Mutual. City of Seattle burned to the ground in the 1800s, and this bank was created to bring the city back to life, and that it did. It was around for 100 years, and 100 years later, I had the great honor to help produce this book about the culture which made the company great. It was written by the CEO who took the company public, and his name is Lou Pepper. Now, essentially, banking hadn't changed in 100 years. I mean, what had happened is we'd found new ways to dispense cash, but we were still talking to tellers through the teller cage, right? And banks were selling commodity products. You may relate to that, right? Checkings and savings and CDs and all that. And they were taking those products to market the way good commodity products are marketed, by price. Now, it wasn't that many years ago that this was the kind of return you could see on your dollars. Don't you wish those days would come back in a hurry, right? And don't worry, they will, I'm telling you. But it's like retail, 4 days to save. I mean, everyone was out there competing on price. And banks call that hot money because competing on price, as you know, doesn't work because the client can always go find a better price, and they will. It was if the only question people had was, where can I get a better return on my money? And when that didn't work, competing on price, banks created a product so simple that a child could understand it called free checking. And of course, pretty soon, everyone had free checking, and so they started to give stuff away. I'm telling you, there was a time there when being at a bank could be a pretty lucrative place. You could walk away with a set of dishes and a gold coin, right? That's what happened. Banks had lots and lots of data on consumers. They knew what you bought, when you bought it, why you bought it, and they reached into their databases to give you lots of reasons to buy more of it. I mean, that's what really was happening. Banking was a real horse race. And we decided this. If we were going to break out of that pack, we were going to have to find a way to compete that had nothing to do with price, nothing had to do with free, and nothing having to do with giving things away. That was the trick. And that's the journey that we went on with all these brands around the globe and the one we're going to go on today. So buckle up, hold on, here we go. Someone threw this magazine on my desk one time. It's out of print now. It's called Working Woman Magazine. And I was astounded by this headline on the cover, brand yourself before someone else brands you. Now that someone else is our clients, our customers, and our prospects, because they all have a pre-existing notion about who we are and what we're all about, right? And so what we wanted to do is we wanted to go explore. How did people feel about the category of banking, the category of printing? How did they feel about the people in the industry? And how did they feel about the experience of interacting with our brand? That's what we wanted to know. Now listen, as you know, you cannot go ask people what they want. They'll tell you. Lower prices, more convenient locations, right? And pretty soon you're broke. And so, but what you can do is you can probe into their subconscious, and that's what we did. If you haven't seen this, Google it. It's called The Why of Buy. It was published in Time magazine, and it's about this thing called neuroeconomics, and I'm going to simplify it for you greatly. Neuroeconomics is this. 95% of all consumer decision-making is subconscious. And yet what happens is we spend almost 100% of our time trying to appeal to this, what I refer to as Homo economicus. Now, Homo economicus is highly rational. Homo economicus, before making a purchasing decision, gathers all the data, creates a little T, writes down the pros and the cons and why should I choose this provider or this product or that product. And what we wanted to do was introduce something different to the occasion. We wanted to introduce Homo economicus to his dim-witted half-brother, Homo sapiens. And we wanted to find out what happened when the two of them went toe-to-toe. Who would win? Would the rational argument win? Here's all of our products and our services and why you ought to have them? Or would the subconscious win? Watch what happened. We put all these photographs in front of people and we said, listen, would you please choose the photograph that reminds you of your banker? I thought, oh no, this is going to get worse. Then we said, look, would you choose the photograph that reminds you of the experience of banking? And they chose this photograph. And we said, well, why in the world did you choose that photograph? And they said, well, we chose it because bankers won't listen to you. There is no dialogue. They have what they have. They're going to give you what they're going to give you, and that's the end of the story. And so we thought, well, it's going to get better now because we're going to ask about our products. And guess what? They're free. We're giving stuff away. We're downtown. And they chose this photograph, which I refer to as Cujo, all right? And we said, why did you choose the photograph? And they said, well, it's easy. Banks will nickel and dime you with fees. They'll charge you to call the bank. They'll charge you if you go over your transaction limit. They'll charge you to speak with a teller, right? And so things haven't changed in banking, not up until this year. That last photograph was taken at the Occupy Wall Street movement when people were so aggravated with Bank of America for their fee structure. And so what happened is we were sitting in a focus group, and the guy in the back corner, if you can see him, made a statement I'll never forget as long as I live. He said, you know, my current bank just doesn't have a soul. And suddenly I knew exactly what he meant. What he meant was that banks are full of stodgy people who will nickel and dime you with fees. They won't listen to a word you say, and they haven't changed in 100 years. And so what we decided is that if we wanted to break out of the pack, We were going to not focus on the products, but we were going to focus on the provider. And we were going to focus on how we were different and unique from everyone else. And what we wanted to do was begin by saying, we hear you. We're empathetic. We understand what you're saying. Now, if you're watching this on video, you're not going to see these commercials. There are 3 of them. They were directed by Christopher Guest. They're just for the people in the room today. They're here only to illustrate the point. Washington Mutual ran hundreds and hundreds of commercials. I only selected 3 to take you on this little journey this morning. After that last spot ran, the president of the bank called me, and she said, Brad, you know that spot that we're running right now on the teller dolls? She said, I think we ought to make some of those. She said, I think it'll be a big deal. So we did, 8.5 ounces of molded plastic. And the next thing you know, I couldn't believe it. I walked into my office one day and they were like, NPR would like to interview you in 5 minutes. And Steve Inskeep really said, I couldn't believe this when we saw it. We saw it here at the show and we were really taken by it. But the thing was, there was something behind it. It wasn't just about making a doll. I mean, when you walk into a bank branch, you could have a teller or you could have an action teller. And so what happened is, we were really rewarding people internally for taking action and helping to meet our clients' needs. So there was a definite operational and brand link to the whole thing. But it started showing up in magazines and stuff. Magazines do that who's in, who's out. And here's what they were doing. They were doing who's out, Vera Wang Barbie at FAO Schwartz. Who's in, Washington Mutual Bank action teller figures. And then the next thing, of course, is, and this always amazes me when someone says about the press, we're going to issue a press release. I always think, you're going to what? Don't issue a press release, go make news. And so we went out and we started talking to the press about the action teller doll, right? But we started describing what it meant to our brand, what's the difference between an action teller and a teller, and guess what happened?
Thanks, Brad. Hey, everybody. It truly has been a wild ride.
I just want to thank all of you gathered here today for making this possible. It's been great.
We've been amazed by the amount of press we've got.
Yeah, we've been showing up in papers, magazines, even places where we don't have a market presence.
Yeah, same with television. Check all this out.
And this Christmas, maybe you can forget about teddy bears and Pokemon cards. How do you think the kids on your holiday list would like a toy bank teller? A Seattle-based bank, Washington Mutual, is selling toy tellers.
I'm Action, the small accounts teller.
People are clamoring to get their hands on a new action doll, but it's not one you might expect. The collectible Washington Mutual teller dolls are selling fast. Kids, adults, even competitors are buying them up.
Well, there's Action Teller Man. Oh, yeah,
Look
he's
at
a cool
that.
guy.
He's got a cell phone. Like, what else?
He's got a cell phone. I think he's got some cash in there to hand out.
Could I talk to your supervisor, please?
Here, take my phone. The boss is on the line.
Thank you very much.
I don't know what you said to that guy, Brad, but it all worked out great.
Thanks for everything, and I can't wait to see what next year's accessories are.
Bye.
We showed that at a big team event. There were 5,000 people in the room that day. And you know what? They didn't have any doubt, who was really the star of the show. Great brands really do start on the inside. So the question is, what will we do for an encore? And guess what? The competition landed it right in our lap. They started charging a surcharge for people who didn't bank with them to use their ATMs. Now, you know what that charge is today? $3. But we looked at that and we thought, wow, Cujo is not going to be happy here. And, so what we did is we went out with this. The $1.50 stops here, our ATMs are surcharge free. You should have seen me the day that I was presenting this to the board of directors. One of the members of the board looked at me and he said, excuse me, young man. I was at the time. Excuse me, young man. I just would like to understand. These are fees that we're charging to people who do not bank with us anyway, and we're going to give those up, right? And I said, yes, sir, that's right. And he said, okay. So what we did is we went out and we put it in the windows. Look at that print, right? That's an innovative form of print. It was then. The things, it doesn't at all compare to what you're doing now, right? But what was so interesting and fascinating to me is that the following year, 1 million people closed their current bank account and moved it to Washington Mutual. And we went out and we asked them why they had moved their account. And of those 1 million new customers, here's the percent of them that said they moved their account because our ATMs were surcharge free. They said if you would treat people who aren't your clients that way, We can't imagine how you would treat our clients. 67%, 670,000 people. And so the board of directors threw me up in a baby blanket. It was the last time ever, right? Then we went into the New York market. And New York is so big and so diverse. We'd bought this old dusty bank called Dime Savings. It was losing customers every day. I remember the first time I walked in there and, walked by one of the teller ledges and went, it was like a big cloud of dust. It was like a pig pen. And so we went in and we had a big rally in New York and we got everybody together and we told them why we were excited and where we were going to go and how we were going to get there. It was really a fun thing, but we knew that everyone else in New York was going to have one question, and that was, who is WAMU? And so in New York City, we wanted to do something unique. We wanted to try to touch the 8 million people in the market using all 5 senses, much like you are experiencing in the room today. And so what we did is we had an office on Fifth Avenue, right not far from Saks Fifth Avenue. And we thought, you know what we'll do? We'll take the tellers and we'll put them in the window. So we went to the mannequin maker who made mannequins for Saks Fifth Avenue, and we said, can you make mannequins for our window of our tellers? And they said, sure, we'd love to do that. It'd be great. And we put our proclamation, what we stood for, in the window, and we were getting ready for the rally. And we had a film crew set up, and they were filming the window on Fifth Avenue in New York City. And what you're about to see was completely unexpected.
Mannequins? I think the mannequins are wonderful. I personally call this bank the Washington Mutual Boutique. It's like looking at Saks Fifth Avenue. I've never seen any bank like this. Let me tell you something. When I saw that, the decoration is fantastic, excellent. What I did, I went from Chase. I canceled Chase. I came exactly to Washington Mutual. This is Chase, this is Washington Mutual. I'm telling you, this is the best bank. The best bank. Free checking and everything.
Isn't that great? Isn't he great? Now, New York's a big place. There actually is no New York. There are many different neighborhoods and sections of New York, as you know. I don't think there's really a New Orleans or Chicago or San Francisco. You really have to segment those geographic areas. And we thought, what common denominator do we have in all of these markets across New York City? And we thought, well, teachers. Who doesn't have a teacher that had some big impact on their life, or a coach, or someone who had a really significant positive impact on them? And so we allowed everyone in New York City to nominate a teacher that we would honor. Everyone could do that. Didn't matter if you were a customer of Washington Mutuals or not. And what we were going to do if you won, well, we bought out every single seat on Broadway. Every single theater, every single kiosk, all on one night. It had never been done in the history of New York City, and anymore they don't allow it. It was the first time and the last time that it ever happened. And when all these teachers had been nominated, we brought them all to Times Square for a big celebration.
Washington Mutual is thrilled to be with all of you on Broadway.
We're off to the spotlight on teachers.
My first Broadway play, Teachers in the Spotlight, coming up a special day on the Great White Way.
Thousands turned out in the rain for a special pep rally.
Featured performances by the cast of Annie and Broadway veteran Joel Grey.
Erase consciousness that teachers are fundamental to society.
What a fantastic present that was.
They're obviously a company who thinks about people.
I'm switching my bank to Washington Mutual.
I'm going to open an account. We've already gotten a number of letters back from the teachers going, I can't believe that any company would actually come into a market and do this for us.
Nicest thing anybody ever done for us. Come on.
I'm going to go right to Washington Mutual as soon as I get a chance.
I just switched banks.
It's so nice to be appreciated.
It's wonderful. This could be the start of something good.
After that event, can you Thank you. After that event, can you imagine the criticism? And somebody's like, how much money did we spend buying out all those seats on Broadway, right? And I pointed something out that I found fascinating. Chase Bank, if you can see this within the red circle, was saying to any Washington Mutual customer, come to us from Washington Mutual and we'll pay you $200. If you're from any other bank, look right below the red circle, you're only worth $100. And so their client acquisition cost was $200 per customer. Meanwhile, tickets on Broadway cost less than $100, right? And that left us lots of room to throw a great party and attain 6.7 billion media hits, for which we paid absolutely nothing. See, it isn't about something, it is something. And ultimately, here's what happens. It's really not about the product, you know, it really is about the provider. When you have a choice between the two, what do you want to promote? All your products, or do you want to promote you, the provider, and most importantly, value comes from this. How, when people choose among providers, what pain do they have? How is that decision painful? And to the extent that you can eliminate that pain, that creates value. And that's why value creation truly is everybody's job, right? If everyone in the organization, if everyone on the team knows, relative to all other competitors, what pain is there in making a choice among printers, among banks, fill in the blank, right? So here's what happened. Up against banks that had been there for 2 centuries, within 90 days, number one in advertising awareness, a 400% increase in new checking relationships. There was a 15% increase in deposits, and 40% of those 8 million people in New York said, hey, this is a company that really cares about the community, and that made a big difference. The Wall Street Journal said, as banks elbow for consumers, Washington Mutual thrives. New households over that 5-year period, 1999 to 2004, 3 million people closed their bank accounts and moved to Washington Mutual. I left in 2005. I'd been there almost 10 years. The stock was at an all-time high. And for the next 3 years, it traveled along pretty well. And then we all looked back and we said, what in the world happened? This institution that had been around since 1889 all of a sudden had been shattered. How in the world could that have occurred? And you know what happened? It was right here. Banks were making a lot of money, particularly on subprime mortgages. And I'm telling you guys something, you've been reading the paper lately, they're coming back. That, you know, banks are right up to their old trick again. And so what's happening is that they were making a lot of money, and that money was hard to pass up. It was very difficult, but they weren't thinking about the customer. And so ultimately, the bank came down and the entire industry came down because the industry really was building products for the company instead of for the customer. And I thought that that was the lesson from that. It's still going on today. This is 2006, and ultimately Chase purchased Washington Mutual, and with the Occupy Wall Street movement, Chase wasn't faring any better with fees than anyone else. Well, listen, by that point I was tired. This is Seattle, Washington, and there was a 10-acre brown site. It was right on the water in downtown Seattle. It was toxic. And I got a call from Mimi Gates and from Susan Brotman and Jeffrey, one of the founders of Costco, and they said, look, we want you to sit on the executive committee of the Seattle Art Museum. We're going to do something magnificent. We're going to take that toxic brown site, and we're going to create a beautiful sculpture park. We're going to raise $200 million. Okay, that was a lot of cash to raise. And we want everyone in the community to participate. And so we did that. We went out and we raised $200 million. If you go to Seattle, the Olympic Sculpture Park is absolutely remarkable. It's beautiful. That sculpture is there today. And then I became very environmentally aware, and I started looking at the covers of magazines, right? And I thought, boy, you know, we might be in some trouble here. I mean, it looks like things aren't getting any better. You guys can relate to these, the big dry. I thought, you know, after enough of these articles came out, I thought, what is it going to take to really cause action here? And I wanted to get out and make a real difference in the world. I thought that was really important, and I thought it's going to have to be 501 degrees at the local Walgreens before anyone's going to move. But the more I looked around, I realized that in Lanai, Hawaii, there was a solar field that provides 1/3 of the power for the island, and that in Bavaria, Germany, this solar field provided enough energy to fuel the entire community. And so I went to Europe, and we rolled out a solar brand in Europe. And it was great, great fun. I can't tell you how much fun I had. And then all of a sudden I came home for a visit, and I realized all of the freeway signs had changed. I realized that there was just severe trouble. And I think the same weekend that I was home, I picked up this magazine, and it said, global warming is a hoax. And I thought, you know, this is just a testament to man's ability to ignore the obvious, right? But I thought, there's one thing here that absolutely cannot be ignored, and it was this.
Fear gripping Wall Street this morning as investors brace for another wild ride. The Dow hit a milestone on Monday, closing below 10,000 for the first time in 4 years, wiping out nearly a decade of gains. The crisis of confidence on Wall Street is playing out on Main Street, with banks, large corporations, small businesses, and individuals all caught in the midst of a global credit crunch.
Okay, so there's where I was at that intersection, right between the economy and the environment. And I got a call from a gentleman in Southern California, Stephen H. Gordon. And Stephen said to me, you know what, we've raised a little bit of cash here. We think it's time that we turn the banking system around. Now, you can imagine, I never thought I'd be back inside a bank in my life. I'd have had more than enough of that, and great fun. But you know, I realized if he had raised $460 million to start a brand new bank, that was pretty significant because JetBlue had started with about $135 million in capital. So before I went to meet with him, I really wanted to keep this in mind on the way to that meeting. The man was sitting on $435 million, and I thought I have to have my head clear. What's a brand? Well, a brand is not the advertising, it's not the logo, it's not the products and services, it's not even the company, right? The brand is the collective perception that people have of us. And so I thought if he starts talking to me about the logo or the advertising, I thought, you know, I got a big Rolodex, I'll refer him to a million people, but I'm not his dude. And so what happened is I was also keeping in mind this, you know, if you look at this list, you've probably seen it many times of all the sources of marketing and advertising that people don't trust, most of it. But the thing that is at the top of the list is recommendations from other people. And that has remained number one for many, 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 many years. And so what I realized is that the whole company was the marketing team. And I thought, I wonder if he shares this perspective, right? I thought brands begin with vocabulary. And they go right into the operations of the organization. That's the soul of a brand. And great brands begin with language. And I sat down to have a conversation with him. And I kept referring to team members. And he would correct me. And he would say, no, bankers. And I would talk about branches, and he would correct me, and he would say, no, those are offices. And I would talk about the customer, and he would say, no, we don't have customers, we have clients. Then I asked him the million-dollar question. Who is Opus Bank, and why was it created? And here was the answer he gave me. He said, credit is frozen, and I believe it's time for banks to step up and lead the economic turnaround. And I remember walking out of that meeting, and my heart was beating a little bit faster, and I think we'd talked for 2 hours, and it felt like 15 minutes, and it was just such an amazing thing, and I thought, you know, I really want to be part of helping rebuild this economy from the bottom up and really helping our region. And so I thought, I'm going to go look at all the visionary statements that people are handing this CEO about what he's about to build right now. And I wanted to share those with you because I thought you might find them to be interesting. They read like this. We will provide the best banking experience our clients have ever had. With a comprehensive array of products, a relentless focus on service. In fact, we will be the premier provider. And I thought, when those are published, I know exactly what's going to happen. Because after all the conversation that we had had, it is not the image he had in his mind, and it wasn't the image I had in my own. Well, here's what happened. The date's correct. Wednesday, July 6, 2011, if you can't read that, less than a year ago, we got all of the members of our team in the room to talk with them about this vision, to talk with them about how we win and why we're unique and what our game plan was for going forward, because we had a new and a different perspective. And that was that we're new, this is unique, and we've been created for a reason. And then we set about doing all the things you do when you're building a brand. We did all those visual cues, right? And so what's happened in the past 6 to 12 months? Well, we've gone from 5 offices to over 50 up and down the West Coast. We've gone from 50 employees to over 500 employees. And we've taken that $460 million in seed capital, and it now exceeds $2 billion. And so lots of great things are happening. Great companies grow because they're doing great things. So here are the lessons. And I thought it was time to apply these to Consolidated Graphics, since I was a guest here and I've had an opportunity to observe over the past couple of days. On 4 continents around the globe, all those brands that we spoke to, here's what we were able to conclude. Number 1, that it's about the provider, not the product, right? That's what's really important. Secondly, great brands begin on the inside with language. Third, you can't be clear and aligned externally until you're clear and aligned internally. Finally, value is everybody's job, right? Because value is about finding that pain people have in choosing a provider and having everyone on your team know how you fill that gap uniquely. Build products for the client, not for the company, right? And memorable experiences touch all 5 senses, much like I'm experiencing right now and you are experiencing right now. And I will tell you this, print is not dead. Print is very much alive. And Consolidated Graphics is truly a company that gets it. I concluded this in the last 48 hours. I did not have this impression when I left to come here. I didn't know what I was going to say about it. And all I can say is this, if you have an opportunity to hook onto Consolidated Graphics, hold on for life, because this place, this team is really going to go somewhere and really is going to do great things. Thank you. It's been a pleasure to be with you today.